How many times as Christians do we cry out to God when we're going through a difficult season in our life? Maybe we're asking for guidance when we have a difficult decision to make, or maybe we're trying to get some peace or some clarity when we deal with a loss. See, the reality is we should go to God when we have difficult things, and we should go to God when we need things that we want to ask for. But God's not just a vending machine that we go to when we have times of need. The reality is that God wants us to think about not just our circumstances, but also our responsibilities. See, we have free will. God has given us free will. And a lot of the times the things in our life are the human sinful nature. And when we get out of alignment with God's design for us, it causes problems. God wants us to align ourselves in harmony with His design. When we don't align ourselves in harmony with His design, we fall victim to the human nature of sin. And we have to think about what our responsibility is in that. To be the best version of ourselves, we have to understand and accept that we have a responsibility to try to be more like Him. That's a process we as Christians call sanctification. And part of that entails understanding what we have control of and accepting responsibility for those things. In James 1, verse 12, it says, God blesses those who patiently endure testing and temptation. Afterward, they will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love Him. And remember, when you are being tempted, do not say, God is tempting me, because God is never tempted to do wrong. He never tempts anyone else. Temptation comes from our own desires, which entice us and drag us away. These desires lead to sinful actions. And the reality is because we are separated from God by sin, we're naturally going to default to the desires of our heart. And sometimes those desires take us away from our design. In 2 Corinthians 10, verses 3, Paul says, we are human, but we do not wage war as humans do. We use God's mighty weapons, not worldly weapons, to knock down the strongholds of human reasoning and to destroy false arguments. We destroy every proud obstacle that keeps people from knowing God. We capture their rebellious thoughts and teach them to obey Christ. See, the reality is that our thoughts of human nature could be sinful. It doesn't mean we're bad people. It doesn't mean we're evil by nature, but it means that we're separated from God's design. And through the process of sanctification, we learn to align ourselves to be more like God. But as Paul is saying, that's a process. We have to take thoughts captive. We have to understand that we need to align ourselves with the way that God wants us to be. There's a responsibility of self-improvement there. And finally, some encouragement. We know that God has a plan for us. We know that God has equipped us to do what it is that He calls us to do. In Romans 8:27, the writer says, and the Father who knows all hearts knows what the Spirit is saying, for in the Spirit pleads for us believers in harmony with God's own will. And we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to His purpose for them. God calls us to be in harmony with His design. God equips us to be more like His Son, Jesus. That's the desire of His heart. And sometimes the desires of our heart can lead us away to selfishness or to pride or to lust of the flesh, sins of the mind. But in reality, we can help ourselves by understanding that we have our responsibility for God's calling on our own life. So we can take heart, we can be encouraged, knowing that we have our circumstances, but we also have a God who loves us, who has designed us and equipped us with the ability to mold ourselves into the best version of ourselves that we can be, which is the version that is most like Christ. So we can take heart and be encouraged by being more like Christ.